Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 8 of the Star Wisdom astrology course. And this part is going to be taught by Venus. And this is one of my Venus hats. I have a few, but I like this one because it's soft and furry, and I love the color. It's blue. I've got Venus in Pisces, which is all about the sea, and then there's a beautiful brooch. And Venus is all about beauty. It's very receptive. It's about what we love and what we will draw towards us because we just love it. Venus takes about 1 year to go round the zodiac, just like the sun and Mercury. So she spends about 1 month in each sign, and she goes retrograde every 2 or 3 years. Now, because she takes the same amount of time to go around the sun as we take to go around the sun, then Venus is never far away from the sun in the chart. In fact, it's never more than 1.5 signs away from the sun. So people will often have Venus either in the same sign as their sun or in the previous sign or the next sign. And Venus in the elements, in Earth, Venus loves anything material like food and sensual, furry things, or duvets, and or gardening, or if, especially if in Taurus, the throat, they might really like singing. Venus in a water sign, really, they love water. If you've got a child with Venus in a water sign, then they're probably very happy in the bath. And it might be, a good idea to put them in the bath whenever they feel a bit distressed. I'm Venus in a water sign. I love being by water, by the sea or by a stream or a lake. And I love having baths. Venus in an air sign loves to communicate. It loves ideas and will be seeking out knowledge and information. And Venus in a fire sign likes excitement and adventure and action, and oh yeah, let's go and do something exciting. So I'm going to share my screen. And Venus sits in the tools planets section, and it's in the yin zone of the tools. Because the yin, it's receptive. Venus is about receiving. Mars was about action, about doing things, and Venus is about receiving. It's the feminine principle. And remember that the blue sections are all about learning through experience. So you get the general idea, and then you just have to keep practicing, and eventually you'll go, oh, I get it now. And it's about acceptance. It's about accepting something, receiving something. So here's Venus in my chart. It's the women's symbol, the circle over the cross. And as you can see, I've got it in Pisces. And Venus rules 2 signs and 2 houses. Now, in the old days, all the planets, except for the sun and moon, did rule 2 signs and 2 houses. That was before they discovered the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And then, of course, when they discovered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, it's like they had to allocate those to signs and houses. And so they took over some of the duplicates that Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn had. And it just left Venus and Mercury with 2 signs and 2 houses. So Venus rules both Taurus and Libra. In Taurus, it's all about the physical sensations, the things that we love at a physical level: food, comfort, anything that is physical or practical, like gardening or singing. In Libra, it's an air sign, and it's about communication and balance. And so in Venus in Libra, it's more about our relationships that we love, who we draw towards us because we just love being with them. And then the two houses is the second house is ruled by Taurus. So this is about security. Venus is very much about drawing towards us the things that will make us feel secure. We need food. So, that makes us feel secure. And it's also about our values. So Venus rules the second house, and it's about what do I value more than anything else? And I'm not talking necessarily about material things. I'm talking more about concepts or philosophies. And it's one of the things that we're not really encouraged to do in our cultures, to think about our values. What are our top values? And I always say to people, you should always know what your top 3 values are, because it's virtually impossible to make a good decision if you don't know what your values are, because you don't know what to base your decision on. Now, I would hazard a guess that for most of you watching this, that your top value is freedom. And so when you make a decision, an important life decision should always be about which of these choices is going to give me a sense of that I have more freedom. So Venus is very much about values, and that is its Taurus aspect. Then the Libran aspect rules the 7th house, which is about one-to-one relationships. Who do I draw into my life because I love being with them, because I feel good when I'm with them? And Venus is going to teach us about the planetary transits. So remember, Mars taught us about the age clock, which is a uniquely Huber tool. But all astrologers use planetary transits. And this is based on the fact that the planets are always moving. So they may all be in one position at the time you were born, but they're not going to be there now. They'll have all moved on. And the moon, it comes back every month. The sun takes a year. Mercury comes back after a year. Venus after a year. Mars 2 years. Jupiter 12 years to go all the way around. Saturn 30 years. Uranus 84 years. Neptune about 180 years. And Pluto about 250 years. Now, if you were really on it, you could be watching the moon every month and looking at when the moon triggers planets in your chart. So my sun is at 21 degrees Pisces. I could be looking every month at when the moon is on 21 degrees Pisces, because then it is stimulating my sun. I'm afraid I don't do that, but some astrologers do. And it will always be on a different day of the month, because the moon has a monthly cycle of 28 days, whereas the zodiac signs tend to be more like 30 days. So it's always shifting. And it can be a very useful exercise to do. The sun, we always celebrate our solar return on our birthday, although the sun may actually land on 21 degrees Pisces the day before my birthday, or even the day after, not necessarily on my birthday. And that's called our solar return. So we could be looking at all these planets that move very quickly. But like the moon, its impact on my sun is going to be a matter of a few hours. The impact of Mars on my sun, when Mars hits my 21 degrees Pisces, might only be a few days. But once we get into the slow moving planets, then the impact lasts for longer. So Jupiter, when it lands on your sun, for example, might last for a couple of weeks. And if it's in its retrograde motion, it might last for significantly longer. Pluto when it lands on your sun, for example, could last for several months. And if it's in its retrograde motion, and Pluto can retrograde 2 or even 3 times, it can last up to 2 years. So these slow moving transits are really important to look at. And I would always look at my slow moving transits. So on the left, we have my regular star map, which you can access through the astro.com program that I've shared the video with you all. But if you go into your star map in the astro.com program, you'll see a little box that you can click that says transits, which you can click on, and it will then show your star map with where all the planets are right now. So, as I said, I'm not really interested in the very fast moving planets. What I'm interested in are the very slow moving planets. And in the star map on the right hand side, you might just be able to see the little green symbols around the outside, which are the symbols of the planets and where they are now. So let's look at those in a bit more detail. So first of all, the most significant one is always Pluto, because that is the real mover and shaker. And it has just moved out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. So it's approaching my ascendant, my AC. This is a significant point in the chart. When Uranus went over my AC, that coincided with my age point on Uranus when I had this significant accident. The AC often is about our physical appearance. And when I had that bicycle accident, it changed the appearance of my mouth and my chin. These are not my own teeth. I had to have a bridge fitted, and my chin is slightly to one side compared to where it was. So when Pluto goes over my AC, I am expecting that there may be some form of change in my appearance. But I know it's coming this time. I didn't know Uranus was coming last time. And so this time I can be more prepared, hopefully. But planetary transits often have a little bit of a surprise element in them. They're coming at us from the outside. It's not like the age clock, which is our biorhythm that comes from the inside. It's personal to us. Planetary transits are not quite as personal. They tend to be impacting everybody, and it's only if they happen to land on a planet in our own star maps that it's an extra significance for us personally. But otherwise, they're impacting everybody. Pluto at the beginning of Aquarius is impacting everyone. So then we have Saturn, which has been hovering backwards and forwards over my Venus, Mercury, and almost reached my Sun. It will be on my Sun soon. And Saturn always restricts, remember, it tends to boundary. And I definitely noticed that my energy didn't feel as dynamic as usual. I felt more restricted, more like I had to look after my energy more. But equally, because Venus Mercury is very creative, especially in Pisces, I've been very planning my creative activity. Created this whole astrology course, created all the presentations, and during this Saturn over my Venus Mercury phase, and of course I've had to plan that very carefully. I live in a van, so even just having to find somewhere to do it, to record it. And then Neptune is right at the end of Pisces. Now, when it went over my sun a couple of years ago, I knew that Neptune was coming over my sun. Neptune, remember, takes about 180 years to go all the way round the zodiac, and its home sign is Pisces. So for all of us Pisces people, this has been really an amazing opportunity to have Neptune going through our own sign, which it has been since 2012. And I've been very curious, when it's been landing on my Venus, Mercury, and then on my Sun. I've just known that these are going to be really creative times. And I've deliberately used those planetary transits to develop myself creatively. That's very high vibration Neptune. Very no vibration Neptune is very much about addictions. And I have noticed that my addictions have been coming up to the surface and I've had to deal with them again, some of which I abandoned 30 years ago, but they represented themselves and I've had to work with them again. Uranus is towards the end of Taurus and it's been going over my Mars. So again, it's like this, my Mars, my active energy, and Uranus is about inspiration and creativity, again, coinciding with developing this Star Wisdom astrology course. Uranus and Mars can be very problematic, low vibration. It can definitely be about unexpected accidents and things like that. So I've been ultra careful because I knew it was coming. I could see that I was going to have Uranus on my Mars. How was I going to use this energy at the highest vibration possible and not be beaten about by the universe saying, pulling the rug out from under my feet, saying, you're not listening. You're not listening. We're going to make you stop and you're going to have to listen. Now, Jupiter, I wouldn't always look at Jupiter because, as I said, it's very fast moving and its direct hit can only last sometimes about 2 weeks. But if it is making a significant impact in the chart, so for me, at the moment, it's opposite my Saturn, then I would pay attention to it. It's a bit like a spotlight. And also because it's opposite my Saturn during its retrograde phase. So it's lasting more than 2 weeks. It moved across and then went off for a bit and then it's coming back. So I'm coming to relook at it again and then moving forward again. High vibration, I've been using Saturn to prepare and to plan. And so Jupiter will emphasize that and will help me to do that. So I just want to say a little bit more about the retrograde phases. All the planets go retrograde except for the sun and the moon. And if they go forward over one of your planets and then they retrograde back over it, and then they go forward over it again, then you're going to get 3 hits on that planet. And some, like Pluto, can go back again and then forward again. So you might get 5 hits and occasionally even 7. It's very rare, but 3 hits is quite common. So the first time it goes over, it can be a bit of a, oh, what happened there? It was a bit of a surprise, maybe. And then we move on and we forget about it. And then it goes back again. You're like, oh, hang on a minute, we're back here again. And when it comes backwards, then you really have to stop and you really have to consider, what is this teaching me? What is this showing me? What is it demonstrating to me? Because when it goes forward again, you want to make sure that it's going to go forward smoothly this time and not be another unexpected surprise that you think, but hang on a minute, I just went through that recently and now I'm dealing with it again. So when it goes through its retrograde phase, you really want to stop and consider, what is this about? What is this teaching me? And the oppositions are always significant too. So Pluto is at the beginning of Aquarius, and its opposite is on my Uranus. Now, I have a Uranus-Neptune square. So Uranus is at 3 degrees of Leo, and Neptune is at 2 degrees of Scorpio, and Pluto is coming up to 2 to 3 degrees of Aquarius. So it's actually impacting the whole thing. And because Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are so slow moving, everybody around my age will be having this. Everybody a year older than me or a year younger than me has got Uranus and Neptune in roughly the same places. And therefore, Pluto is impacting all of us. But it will impact us in different ways depending on the houses where our Uranus and Neptune are, because we'll all have them in different houses. So my Uranus is on my descendant, and Pluto is making me look at my impact in the outside world. The descendant, remember, is at the entrance to the cave. It's where I interact with the outside world. And so Pluto is making me really reconsider my interactions with the outside world. And for example, while Pluto is opposite my Uranus and squaring my Neptune, I'm going on a very long trip to the US. And I know that it's an opportunity for me to present myself to the outside world in a different way because nobody knows me. It's really hard to change the way we present ourselves to the outside world when we just hang out with the same people all the time. It's very hard to change. It's very hard to explore a different sense of identity. And Pluto is about to hit my house of self-identity. It's like it's an opportunity for me to explore my self-identity. And who do I want to be? How do I self-identify? So this is a huge opportunity for me. And by embracing that opportunity, by embracing that transit and thinking, how can I use this? What can I do with it in order to explore it? Then I'm much more likely to work with it at a high vibration. Whereas if I knew nothing about it, well, you can bet your bottom dollar that Pluto is going to come along and pull the rug out from under my feet and say, uh-oh, no, you need to be doing this right now. You need to be doing something different. You need to be changing something. You need to let go of something. Pluto is always about letting go, and Uranus is always about change. So I'm being asked to let go and change something about my self-identity. So the opposite of Saturn for me at the moment is about halfway through Virgo. I don't have anything there at the moment, but Neptune is at the end of Pisces, is opposite my Jupiter at the end of Virgo. And, this is a beautiful opportunity because Virgo is all about expanding and growing and learning. And Neptune, is all about the imagination and oneness. And I'm doing this big trip. I'm expanding my horizons. And for most of the time, I'm going to be following the coast, Neptune, the sea. And, I'm so excited about, these new adventures and people that I'm going to meet. And then Uranus at the end of Taurus is opposite the end of Scorpio. So it's not long gone past my North Node, the opposite. And again, I had to really think about, what do I want to do to develop and create my career? It was when the StarWisdom Astrology course was born. Uranus is about accessing those new ideas from the infinite realm of consciousness. I knew I had Uranus coming opposite my North Node on my Mars. And so I was like, what can I do with this? What do I need to do with this? And all you have to do is ask, especially with Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. You just ask, how can I best use this energy? How can I use it in the highest vibration, in the most creative way possible? And then finally, the opposite of Jupiter, as I already said, is on my Saturn. Now, occasionally, I would also look at the squares, particularly for Pluto. I'd look at what is the square of Pluto doing. And the square of Pluto at the moment is at the beginning of Taurus and the beginning of Scorpio. And I've already said that it is squaring my Neptune. So here we have the squares. I'm not going to go through them all again, but they are all significant points, and particularly when they superimpose on direct transits or opposite transits. Now, we can also have transits that are trines, the blue aspect, the easygoing aspects. But because those are much less problematic and they offer less improved growth, if you like, then I personally don't tend to look at those. But a lot of astrologers do. They will look at all the aspects, the transits. They will look at the sextiles, the squares, the trines, the oppositions, and even more. But for me, it's the direct transits when the planet lands on your planet. The opposites, those are the two most significant. And then the squares can also be very significant, especially if they are reinforcing an age point. And you'll often find that planetary transits reinforce age points. And that's like another extra whammy, because not only have you got that impulse coming from within your biorhythm, the yang energy, but you've also got that impulse coming from without, that more receptive yin approach. So you've got this double thing happening. And most significant age point transits will have a corresponding planetary transit, but not all. A quick way to do this is to look, if you look in your star map, on the left-hand side, you will see a list of all the degrees where the planets are and the signs that they are in. And what you want to do is you want to look at where the planets are now. So Jupiter is currently, as I'm making this video, at 13 degrees Gemini, Saturn's at 14 Pisces. And then you start to look for those numbers down the list. And because we're mainly looking at the direct hits, so you're looking for the same sign. So Saturn in Pisces, got Sun in Pisces, and Venus and Mercury in Pisces. Or you are looking for the same quality. So Taurus is fixed. So you're looking for the other fixed signs, which are Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. So we've got Pluto at a fixed sign of 1 degree Aquarius. So I'm looking in my list for anything else that is at 1 or 2 or 3 degrees of a fixed sign. So we've got Uranus and Neptune, a fixed Leo, and fixed Scorpio. And then I know, now I know that this Pluto is going to impact those two planets. So here I've just put it as a little marker. So I know that Jupiter is impacting my Saturn, as is Saturn at a square, because they're both mutable. Sagittarius is mutable, Pisces is mutable. So therefore Saturn is not only impacting my Mercury, Venus, but it's also squaring my Saturn, which is another very useful piece of information to have, because Saturn is about constricting and boundaries, or about being able to plan and organize. Now, there are three significant transits that happen for everybody. And the first of these is what is called the Saturn return. And it happens for everybody at exactly the same age, 28.5 to 29.5, sometimes 30, but usually around 29.5. So if you remember, on the age clock, that is going to be just before the sixth house cusp, the stress zone of the sixth house. So this is when Saturn, the planet Saturn, has gone all the way around the zodiac and come back to the place where it started when we were born. This is called the Saturn return, and it is almost always problematic for people. In fact, for some people, it can even be the end of their life. Remember, in the old days, Saturn represented death because it was the boundary. But it's always a growth point. And for some people, it can be very traumatic. It can last for a long time, especially if it goes into retrograde during that period. So it can last from anything from 6 months to 2 years. And it's nearly always a challenging time for people. It's like a growth point. It's like a point of maturation. And if you know you've got it coming, then obviously you can work with it and it not be such a shock to the system. Then the next one is the Uranus opposition. So Uranus takes 84 years to go all the way around the chart. So roughly around age 42, it will be opposite. But because Uranus doesn't have a circular orbit, it has more of an elliptical orbit, it will go through some signs quicker than others. And so the Uranus return can be anything within 4 years, either side of age 42. And that is always a period of change. Remember, Uranus is about change. And then there is the Pluto return. So Pluto takes about 250 years to go all the way around. So not hardly anybody's going to make the Pluto opposition, but we will make the Pluto square, which again can happen at around the same time as the Uranus opposition. It can happen anywhere, because again, Pluto has a very elliptical orbit. And so the Pluto return can happen anywhere between the mid-30s and age 60. And again, this is the classic, what people call the midlife crisis. So I say when the age clock arrives at the invert point of the 8th house, that is, for me, the midlife crisis, which happens for everybody at exactly the same age, between 45 and 48. But traditional astrologers would call this Uranus return and the Pluto return as part of the midlife crises, but these can happen at quite different ages. And also, because of the speed of Uranus and Pluto through the different signs, they can happen in different orders. So for some people, the Uranus return will happen first and then the Pluto return. And this will be a generational thing. So you'll get like a whole generation where the Uranus return will happen before the Pluto return. And then you'll get another generation where they're happening together because they were at the same time, particularly people born in the second half of the 60s, they have Uranus and Pluto on each other. And then you'll get another generation where they'll get their Pluto return first and then the Uranus return. And this is really interesting to look at this from a psychological perspective because Uranus is about change and Pluto is about turning over the compost heap. It's about digging deep and getting into what's underneath, the issue. So for some people, they'll go through the change first and then they have to dig deep. And for other people, they have to dig deep first and then they get the change. So it's very interesting to see and to look for where you are in your journey and what was first for you and what is going on first for other people. So the homework, what I want you to do is to plot the transits on your chart and look at their opposites and the squares for Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto. You can find these, as I said, by going into the astrology program and clicking on the transits button. But if you wanted to look at transits for a completely other year or day or whatever, then you need an ephemeris. And this is a book that will give you all the planetary positions every day. And the most common ephemeris everybody uses is called the American ephemeris. And there is one version, which is 1900 to 2000. And then there is another version, which is 2000 to 2050. Of those, there are still two versions each. One is called the midnight and one is the midday. And it's just that it tells you the position either at midnight or at midday. Your choice, which one you take. It doesn't really matter that much. I tend to use the midday one. So I would highly recommend, if you're really serious about astrology, that you'll get yourself these two ephemerae, plural, and you can usually get them secondhand somewhere online. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.